For the Memphis Grizzlies, it feels like a classic case of one step forward, two steps back. You finally get Zach Edey back into the fold and you're looking good. And then you say, okay, Ty Jerome is very close to being back. And then boom, Ja Morant out at least 2 weeks. We got to break it down. We're going to break some minutes restrictions things down as well. And plus, we're going to preview the game between the Grizzlies and Spurs. All that right now coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in San Antonio, Texas on today. I'm not in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm in San Antonio out here to check out the game between the Grizzlies and the Spurs. So make sure you stay tuned for all of my coverage over at commercialappeal.com, over on X at Damichael C. We're going to be breaking down everything and anything that you want to know in terms of this game. Again, appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network out there. You heard that right. Locked On Podcast Network is the number one sports podcast network in the land, baby. But we got a lot to talk about in today's show. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of things on the news front, whether it was the Grizzlies put out, whether it was some reporting that was done as well by myself. And then we're going to preview an upcoming game tonight between the Grizzlies and the Spurs. Every game feels big at this point, so I won't even say it's a big game. But that's neither here nor there. We got to start with the biggest part of why we are having this discussion here on Locked On Grizzlies today, and that is Ja Morant injury update. The Grizzlies put out an injury update on Ja Morant on yesterday, and it pretty much was straightforward. Ja Morant will be reevaluated in 2 weeks due to a grade 1 right calf strain. So we saw Ja leave the game, and it was classified as calf soreness. This is going to be hard for people to stomach because Ja Morant missing any time while this team looks this bad right now is tough. But given the circumstance, given the options here, this is best case scenario. Remember, Ty Jerome has a right calf strain as well, but it's a higher grade one. And his higher grade injury has kept him out already 4 weeks. Ja Morant is going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, which at least keeps him out for roughly 7 games. And then you see, where he is from that point and kind of go from there. We know about calf injuries, depending on, the severity, what else is going on in there. There is always that chance of if a guy comes back too soon, you either potentially risk, risking a higher grade calf injury. In the case of Ja Morant, being bumped up to a grade 2 calf strain where you're missing at least 4 weeks, being reevaluated in 4 weeks. Or even worse, with that A word, the whole Achilles things. We've seen that a couple times, right? Tyrese Halliburton, Kevin Durant had calf injuries. They rushed back. Now they were in the playoffs, but they got back, and those injuries kind of ballooned, and we saw them miss full seasons. But in the case of Kevin Durant and Tyrese Halliburton is expected to miss a full season. But anyways, this is a best case scenario given that it was a calf injury. I think that has to be added context. I know there was the play that I saw, and many fans who were watching the game, you saw Ja Morant kind of gingerly walking off the floor, and it was after he had kind of a collision with Sam Merrill. His body kind of twisted Ja's body. And to my understanding, is I've talked to doctors about this whole calf injury things, it's mostly a non-contact type of injury. So I'm not sure how, and I'm going to get those details as well, but this isn't something where it's like, oh, they bumped into each other and his calf started. This is usually generated from, some type of push off or explosiveness and things like that. And Ja was trying to hustle for the basketball on that play. So this is a tough break. There's no other way to put it. It's 2 weeks, which is not long in NBA times. You're talking about an 82-game season, and 2 weeks is roughly 6 or 7 games. So it should be manageable. But in the case of the Grizzlies, it's really not, because it's not just the fact that you're losing Ja Morant for 6 or 7 games. It's you're losing Ja Morant while you're 4-10. You're losing Ja Morant when you just got his center, Zach Edey, back It's you're losing Ja Morant when you've already lost Scottie Pippen Jr., when you've already lost Javon Small, when you've already lost Ty Jerome. Those are the 4 point guards. And I always go back to this when we talked to Zach Kleiman at Media Day, and he was saying, like, oh, we feel like the point guard position is the strength of the team, right? You know, we have this guard depth with Ty Jerome, with Scottie Pippen Jr., and with Ja Morant. And, you know, and then they like Javon Small. And we've seen in smaller sample sizes what he's capable of. Like, Javon Small, he can get some buckets. He can get some buckets. Now, you don't have any of those guys available. So where do the Grizzlies go from here? That is the question over the next 6-7 games. Do you pursue outside options? Do you pursue internal options? Feels like right now the goal will be to address this thing internally, and we've already seen that play out a little bit with Jamal Meshack being promoted and given a 2-way contract. The Grizzlies waived PJ Hall, so you got Jamal Meshack who's going to come into the equation. We're going to talk a little bit more about him later. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Vince Williams Jr., Cam Spencer, I know those aren't the most exciting names that you want to hear in terms of Grizzlies point guards, but that's just where you are. I mean, this doesn't happen. It just really doesn't happen where a team is zapped of all of its point guard depth. And you can lose some wings and you can have a John Conchar who can kind of come in there and still be impactful on the end result without scoring, 20 points or anything like that. It's hard to do that at the point guard position because you're orchestrating the offense. And without a point guard, things look ugly. Things look murky. And what we've seen from this Grizzlies team is we saw it a couple games ago where, Ja Morant missed the game. I believe it was the Celtics game, and the Grizzlies failed to score 100 points for the first time in 24 games. And then if you go to the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Grizzlies lost 108-100 exactly. And if you go back and look at the numbers, you take away that 6-minute stretch where Ja Morant was on the floor, you erase that portion of the game, they don't reach 100 points. They don't. So you're talking about a team that has routinely, consistently topped 100 points, but in a position where they almost scored less than 100 in back-to-back games. That is an indication of just where this team is at the point guard position. You're going to need other guys to step up and be creators as well. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jalen Wells, Cedric Coward. He's going to get some more on the ball reps here, and we're starting to see that, with Cedric Coward playing in pick and roll a little bit more. I know people want to see a little bit more of that. People want to kind of dive into what that's going to look like, and we're going to get into it as the Grizzlies start to do it more and more over the course of the season. But right now, this is a tough situation. It is a tough situation. It is a 6-7 game stretch that you're talking about. This stretch is not as hard as the last stretch that the Grizzlies played, but the thing is, it's road games. The Grizzlies have spent most of the beginning of the season playing at home. So they're now in a stretch where, they're playing a lot of time on the road. And if you look at the games over the next, couple weeks, so to speak, you got this game against the Spurs. You get the Sacramento Kings at home. Then you got to go to the Dallas Mavericks. Very winnable game there. Then you get the Denver Nuggets at home. Then after that, you're at the Pelicans, at the Clippers, at the Kings. Record-wise, 3 of the worst teams in the Western Conference. So it is kind of, disappointing because even though these were some road games, these were very winnable. Well, even more winnable. They're still winnable to a degree, but these were very winnable games where, okay, the Grizzlies 4-10, you can kind of, get closer to 500 in this stretch of games here. So that part of it is disappointing, but you know what? You still got to throw your guys out there. And one thing I'm going to keep saying is even if they're not executing at the highest level, the energy has got to be better. And we saw some of that against the Cavs. If the Grizzlies continue to play, with that energy and effort going forward, they'll steal some games. And that's not, a big take or anything because they've done it before. They've done this over the last few years. They've done it in the grit and grind era. They stole games before, games that they weren't supposed to win based on a talent level because of the fact that they play harder than teams. And this team should be able to do that. Given, the injury situations, who's out there. They got a lot of guys out there who are with a lot to prove, and they need to play like it. So coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, in the next segment, we're going to talk about 2 Grizzlies players who are currently on minutes restrictions. That's right. You heard me right. Couple Grizzlies players, couple important Grizzlies players, couple starters actually on minutes restrictions. We're going to break that down coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. Before we get into that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by none other than Rippling. Here's the thing about Rippling. See, when I think of Rippling, I think of the business owners out there. And here's the truth. SaaS is promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That's sad. Software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance, all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. Everything from onboarding, payroll to IT access. It runs automatically and perfectly in sync. And it's seriously simple to use and gives companies one source of truth for their people, the data, and everything they touch. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnba. Learn more at rippling.com/lockedonnba. That's rippling.com/lockedonnba for 6 months free. Make sure you go take advantage of that now over at rippling.com. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by PrizePicks. Oh boy, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's you and I make decisions every day. But on PrizePicks, being right gets you paid. And don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL right now, NBA, or even both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. And if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates. That's including California, Texas, and Georgia. The new stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph's points, threes, and assists and put them all in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves the game early with an injury, the injury reboot saves my lineup from a loss. Make sure you go take advantage of that. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks is where it's good to be right. Well, I wish I was right about some things with this Grizzlies team. I feel like I've been right a decent amount, but certain things have been really puzzling to me. And one of those things was when we watched that game against the Cleveland Cavaliers and we saw Cedric Coward checked out of the game. I believe it was roughly 5:58 left in the third quarter. The next time we saw Cedric Coward in the game was 5:54 left in the fourth quarter. Almost a full 12-minute stretch where he wasn't available. Cedric Coward was not available. And as I watched it, and as we talked about it on the last show when me and Joe Molax were together, what in the world was going on? Why in the world is one of your best players, who you finally put in the starting lineup so he could play more, in a situation where he sat for pretty much what equaled out to a quarter in a game that you were leading at that point, in a game that you end up losing by 8 points after leading for most of it? But we got some answers. We got some answers on that situation, and we got answers. We got more answers in terms of with Cedric Coward and with Zach Edey. The truth in the matter is both of those players are on minutes restrictions right now. With Zach Edey coming off the ankle injury, this was expected. He played 25 minutes in the first game. I think that's probably going to be roughly around the number we're going to see him at until the Grizzlies kind of feel comfortable getting him more minutes into the fold. So Zach Edey minutes restriction right now. So when you see him out there, you're wondering, why is Jock Landale playing all this time, or however the center situation is working out. Remember the fact that from the Grizzlies standpoint, they want to build him up for more minutes going forward. Now with Cedric Coward, it's a little bit different. But Cedric Coward has played in every single game this season, but we saw it pop up, and it was a day before the Cavs game. Cedric Coward was listed as doubtful with right foot soreness, and doubtful turned into questionable. He was upgraded to questionable. He eventually played, and then he played, like we said, roughly 24 minutes, and it was his lowest minutes total since the third game of the season. And it was like, what's going on? But uh, Grizzlies coach Swanson Isolo did clarify that in that situation, Cedric Coward was dealing with sort of like a stress reaction in his foot, and he's going to be on a minutes restriction for a little bit here. The idea is they want to think long term, right? You don't. I mean, if you know about stress reactions, they can be bad, and they don't want this to balloon into something where he's missing months or needs a surgery. And with Zach Edey, he's coming off of a procedure, so that's kind of the thought process with the Grizzlies. Why these guys are on these minutes restrictions. I don't know how long Cedric Coward will be on this restriction, but of course, as we get more information, we will continue to update you on what we know. As far as Zach Edey, I think he'll kind of progress along as he kind of continues to get game action as well. So not only are you missing, the Ja Morants, the Ty Jeromes, the Scottie Pippen Jr.'s, but two of your other starters and Cedric Coward and Zach Edey are both on minutes restrictions. So I'm going to give my personal thoughts on the idea of putting those guys on minutes restrictions here in a second. But first, I just got to remind you that, and first I got to thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. And then I got to remind you that is the number one sports podcast network out there. And appreciate you guys for helping us reach that goal of being the number one sports podcast network out there. Now getting back to my thoughts on this situation. Here's where I stand. I know the whole idea of the Grizzlies tanking has become a bigger point. And, are they mailing it in? And, I've seen the draft class. I watch a lot of college basketball. And it's some dudes in this draft class. I'm talking about you might get the number 5, number 6 pick this year and it feels like a number 2, number 3 pick in a normal draft. But a lot of talent in this upcoming draft class, especially if you get the right guy, the right fit for whatever you want to do. But that's neither. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that stuff. But right now we're talking about this situation, with the minutes restriction. Are they holding these guys back? I don't think so. Isolo's quote basically was that this is we have to keep the future in mind. Here's what he said. Here's his exact quote. He said, "It's a challenging situation because both guys have done a great job for us. We would like to play them a lot. Both guys are also starting for us. But at the same time, we have to be smart because their future is also very important to us." Now, some people can say, oh, yeah, this is a tank job or whatever the case may be. And I'll say the same thing that Isolo just said from the standpoint of Zach Edey is a very important piece to the Grizzlies' future. Zach Edey didn't have much of an injury history until last season when he had ankle injury. And then the offseason, another ankle injury. And it's like, all right, we got to put this behind us. So the Grizzlies have finally got to a point where they're hoping to put the ankle injuries behind them with Zach Edey. You put that behind him, the hope is that he's going to be on the floor long term. Cedric Coward, the history here. Played 6 games last season. 6 games at the collegiate level. Had to have surgery on his shoulder. He's now playing more, and he's playing high-intensity basketball. Like we know how the Grizzlies like to get up and down the floor, and he's playing more than he's ever played before. It's skip-a-day game here. He's played in the back-to-backs, all the back-to-backs leading up to this point that the Grizzlies have played. So the idea that, he has a sore foot is something you got to be mindful of because, again, we've seen what that can turn into, and these are important pieces. These are important pieces. These aren't just, 1-year rental guys or anything like that. Like Cedric Coward and Zach Edey should be starting for the Memphis Grizzlies for many more years to come, no matter who you put around them, because those are building blocks. Cedric Coward is that prototypical player that you can play with anyone because he has the ability to be a 3-and-D guy. He can put the ball in his hands a little bit as he continues to progress in his career. And Zach Edey is that physical presence, that big who's going to protect the rim for you. He takes pride in protecting his guys. So I think these are two building blocks that I'm okay with the Grizzlies saying, hey, let's take our times and make sure these guys are fully 100% before, again, Iso said he would like to play him a lot. We're gonna come back to that now. Don't trust me. If you think I didn't circle that when he didn't say it, you ain't been listening to Damichael Cole. I circled that because I said, okay, let's follow up on that in a couple weeks, man, maybe a month. Let's see, because you would like them to play a lot, so that means they should be playing 30 plus minutes at some point. But I digress. We're gonna get to that later on. But coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to preview this game between the Grizzlies and the Spurs. It's going to be a big one. We're going to preview that coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all in one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Rugiet. Listen up. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't really solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, or I'm tired. It happens to everyone. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. And if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors, because it's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit Rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA to get 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNBA. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNBA so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Making sure you go take advantage of that now over at Rugiet.com. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies here as we get ready to preview the upcoming game between the Grizzlies and the San Antonio Spurs. Man, I was really excited for this game. And, excitement's still going to be there. It's a nationally televised game. You get to put some more eyes on a couple of the guys. Zach Edey's being back on the floor, Cedric Coward. A big opportunity for a lot of players. But, man, the injuries have piled up for both teams. We won't get to see Stephon Castle, Victor Wembanyama, Dylan Harper. I was really excited to see Dylan Harper. Ja Morant, of course, being out on the Grizzlies side, and all the other injuries at the point guard position. And we know about the injuries on the Grizzlies side, and we're going to talk about that more here in a second. But missing all these guys really makes it tough to project what this Spurs team is. For example, like the top 10 in the NBA in blocks. But like Victor Wembanyama is the reason for that. When you take away his blocks, they're not near the top of the league. So what would the rim protection for the Spurs look like without Victor Wembanyama? They still got Luke Cornett. They got Jeremy Sohan, who has been, a sound defender over the course of his career. We've seen Kelly Olynyk getting minutes for them. I'm not really scared of him as a rim protector if we're looking at it from that perspective. So it's a little bit different, whereas in recent years when you got Victor Wembanyama in there, we've seen literally the Grizzlies have 2-on-1 transition opportunities and decide to pull it out because he was at the rim. Then there's the factor of with the guards, because they're not going to have Stephon Castle. They're not going to have Dylan Harper, but they are going to have De'Aaron Fox. In these last two games, De'Aaron Fox is starting to find his groove. He got a late start to the season, hasn't played much up to this point, but you're starting to see that Sacramento Kings, that shifty, agile, and he's so directed his movements, because he's still one of the quickest guys out there, but he's very patient in getting to his spots. changing speeds, changing pace to make sure, he's playing at his pace and you're not speeding him up and playing him, at the speed that you want to play him at. But the good thing about the Grizzlies is they do have a couple guys that they could throw at him. They do have a Jalen Wells. They do have a Cedric Coward. They have a Contavious Caldwell Pope. They have guys who they can throw at De'Aaron Fox, and he's going to be the one guy who's really that dynamic, all-around scorer that you really have to account for in this game. Again, Cedric Coward, you throw him at him defensively with his long arms, his ability. I think you can throw Jalen Wells at him because both of those guys probably starts, and they can take turns. But other than De'Aaron Fox, you got Devin Vassell. He's gonna get his 3-point shots up. They put the ball in his hands a little bit from time to time. Keldon Johnson, real aggressive player, plays with a lot of energy. And then you got, guys like Jeremy Shohan, Kelly Olynyk, Luke Cornett, Harrison Barnes. A lot of guys who are pretty much role players, so to speak. And I say all that to say this is a winnable game, especially if you would have had Ja Morant. But this is a winnable game for the Grizzlies. What will make it hard to win for the Grizzlies in this game is because of the fact that they just don't have point guards. It's going to be hard to win any NBA game until they figure out how in the world to address this point guard thing. And I asked Isolo about it after practice on yesterday, like, how do you generate good offense right now? How? And he's still figuring that out. I didn't expect a figured out answer because if you've seen what I've seen, the Grizzlies don't got this thing figured out. But it's a situation where they're going to lean, as he said, more into the movement patterns and things like that. So you're going to start to see guys like Cedric Coward play on the ball a little bit more. And it's one of those things that we could look back in 6 months and say, man, that was a blessing in disguise. Cedric Coward got those reps on the ball and took his game to a whole nother level. You're going to see Jalen Wells. You're going to see, Jaren Jackson Jr. All these guys are going to get more opportunity in the role of a primary ball handler. So we're going to see who takes advantage of that and who, quite frankly, shows why they weren't in the role in the first place. Another guy that I want to see in this game is I want to see the Grizzlies continue to lean into Vince Williams as a primary playmaker now. Again, I after this stretch is done, I don't want to see Vince Williams as a primary playmaker no more. So don't get it twisted what I'm saying here. But I do like the fact that Vince Williams is one of the guys who has shown the ability, in small sample size here, of course, of his career, to be able to turn out 6-7 assists, to make the right plays. Of course, I think as teams or as the scouting report gets out on Vince Williams, when he's driving to the basket, you don't see him, driving through contact, finishing left hand, right hand, being an aggressive finisher at the rim that's going to force the defense to collapse and kick it out to guys. Defense are just naturally seeing Vince Williams beat someone off the dribble and offering to help. And I think eventually they're going to say, let's dare him to make a couple of those shots, over the big. Let's see what that floater looks like and things like that. But right now, I think Vince Williams is probably your best option. Again, Cam Spencer, I love him off the ball because of the spot-up shooting that he brings, the movement shooting that he brings. I don't want to see him see those roles taken away from him much if you can prevent that. So that's one guy I want to see. And then the other is, I know it's quick, but let's get a little look at Jamal Meshack. Just throw him out there. I mean, what do you have to lose? You don't have any other point guards out there. And Jamal has the size of a point guard, but if you watched him at Tennessee, that was never really his position, so to speak. Played off the ball a lot. And we've talked about it. He never had a game in 4 seasons at Tennessee where he had more than 5 assists. And then, boom, he goes to the G League, 7 assist game. First 2 games. So it's a different situation here in Memphis where he's being allowed to play with the ball in his hands a little bit more. And you wonder how that's going to translate to the NBA level. I want to see the opportunity because, I don't know how many times I'm going to say it, but I just keep saying it because it's just what we see. You don't have point guards. And Jamal Meshack is someone who is comfortable dribbling the basketball and should be able to help the Grizzlies get into advantageous situations despite, them being limited with the options that they have right now. So we'll see how that game turns out. This is a very winnable game. Of course, the Spurs are still the favorites. They still got De'Aaron Fox. Again, the Spurs have 8 guys. I mean, man, they got 8 guys averaging double figures. 3 of those players will be out. Stephon Castle, Victor Wembanyama, Dylan Harper. But again, you got Luke Cornett averaging over 10 points a game. He's been a really solid pickup for the Spurs coming over from the Boston Celtics. Then we know about some of the other guys, and Jeremy Sochan has not averaged 10 points a game yet, but they kind of worked him into the fold as he came back from his injury as well. So we're going to see how that game turns out. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second listen, go find the Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Joe Mullinax is going to be with you after the Grizzlies and Spurs wrap up. I'm down here in San Antonio, so if you want to follow my coverage, go over to thecommercialappeal.com or go over to X on social media at Damichael C, where I'll post my stories. I'll post the interviews. We're going to have round-the-clock coverage as the Grizzlies play against the Spurs, so make sure you tap into that as well. But Joe Mullinax will be with you on tomorrow, recapping the game. And I'll be back with you after that as I get ready to get back to Memphis following the game against the Spurs. We appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me on today. Remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.